SAEBRS and my SAEBRS. Now, I know I'm going to have a wide variety of grade levels here. There are some specific rules like K through 2. You don't have them do the My SAEBRS version of the assessment. You just do that on the teacher's side. And I'll point out other different things throughout the presentation, some of the nuances, differences between the two. But here's a little bit about me. So I was an educator for over 7 years, mostly for about 5.5 of those years. I worked with students with disabilities. So if you do have specific aimed questions about those types of students, I love answering those questions. And I would love for you to answer or ask those questions so I can put them in the recording for you as well. But yes, I am a sad Wisconsin sports fan, and the Brewers are out of the playoffs. That's all right, though. Now, one thing that hasn't changed in the 38 years we've been a company is our mission statement. And that's always been to accelerate learning for all children and adults of all ability levels, ethnic and social backgrounds worldwide. Now, this is why I wanted you to join my Nearpod. So I'm going to put that link in the chat one more time. And you can use that direct link to sign into my Nearpod. And then you'll get a copy literally of every single slide that I go over, different activities that are built in there. And then really important at the very end, if you have questions, how do you reach out to help and support? How can I continue learning at my own pace? All of that's provided for you at the very end. And to do that on the far right-hand side of your screen, not the one that I'm sharing, hover over the little notes tab. It turns blue, click on it, and then either put in your email address, Google Drive, or OneDrive. It doesn't matter the method that you choose. You're sent a PDF copy of the entire presentation. And bonus, any notes that you take on there, those also are contained in the pages of that PDF as well. So if you know somebody here that's a really good note taker, and you want to borrow their notes, that's absolutely for you to keep. So feel free to do that as well. All right, and then thank you for those that are just joining me now. Excuse me. I'm going to put that Nearpod link in the chat one more time. And then feel free to unmute and ask questions or use the chat to ask your questions throughout the presentation. So here's our learning outcomes for today. I'll give you a second to read through these, make sure it's going to meet your expectations of our meeting. And if you have any questions or anything that also you'd like covered, please put that in the chat or unmute and say, hey, Sam, can you also talk about this as well? Okay. All right, so let's begin our presentation. And who doesn't love a formative assessment right after they get done teaching all day? But teachers, I need to know a little bit more about you and your level of experience with your standardized social and emotional behavior risk screeners. And it doesn't necessarily have to be SAEBRS or my SAEBRS. It could be other ones that you're using. But what level of comfort do you have? I'm expecting mostly 1s and 2s here today, but if I do have some experts here that'd like to ask more advanced questions, I just like to know that information about what your level of experience is. And again, I've turned off names, so don't feel self-conscious about your answers. Oh my goodness, look at this. I do have an expert here with me today, or somebody at least comfortable with that, but I also have quite a few people just getting started out with the screener. So I'm going to put that link in the chat for you one more time, as I had a couple more people join here today. And then after you select your answer, just hit submit. And oh my goodness, it's just like a classroom, I swear. I have beginning learners, ones that are proficient, and ones that are past proficient. So it's going to be just like a classroom. This is wonderful. Okay, so I always teach down to the lowest level of learners, but I'll come up to answer more advanced questions if you have them. And here's our agenda for today. So first of all, we're going to meet SAEBRS, some of the research and how we actually developed SAEBRS. And then we're going to get a chance to get hands-on with the software. So you're going to be able to explore the software, try it out as a student, and then try it out as a teacher, see the different types of questions that you're going to be asked. At the very end, I'll also show you the 2 main reports that you're going to use to view this data. And then I don't know if somebody knew they were unmuted, but there you go, I got you. And feel free to unmute at any time if you did have a question. And then at the very end, we'll actually break down all the information, give you time for question and answer. And then after that, how you reach out to help and support and contact us. So I'll take you through that step by step. And let's first of all, what is SAEBRS? Well, SAEBRS is a computer standardized based test. It has 19 questions for the teacher, and it measures 3 different main domains, and that's your social, academic, and emotional behavior. You can give this as a teacher to any students from K through 12, and I'm going to tell you right now, the first few times you do it, plan about 2 minutes per student. But as you become more familiar with the questions and as you become more familiar with the way that it's formatted, you'll become even more proficient. You'll be able to do it in a minute or two, or less than a minute, depending on how familiar you are with it. But at the very first time you do this with your students, plan 2 minutes per student when doing that. Now, the development of SAEBRS. So a lot went into the development of SAEBRS. It's designed to be highly efficient, very quick to do. It has validity, evidence-based validity overall and domain. It compares your students against other students nationally to identify are they at no risk, some risk, or high risk students. And it also meets the criteria from the NC2 as well. So everything is valid. It's research-based. We have norm data for you to compare your students against other students nationally. Now, what kind of areas are you going to identify with students? So in this social behavior area, so how are they interacting with their friends? How are they interacting with their teachers, with other support staff? Academically, how do they feel about a class? Are they prepared to participate in class? Do they benefit from the academic instruction? And actually, a really neat thing about this is depending on who administers this to the students in your upper grade levels, you may see a student's academic behavior or how they feel about a class change from class to class. Like my son, for example, loves mathematics, performing at a very high level, but when it comes to reading, he's performing at or below grade level, not as big a fan of the reading. So that will change based on which teacher is administering the academic behavior portion of that. And then you have your emotional behavior. So how do they adapt to change? Do they kind of curl up into a ball when they get into stressful situations, or are they ready to meet them face forward? So how do they adapt to those different states? And do they feel sad? Do they feel happy? All of that's included in the quick survey that they do and you do for them. So let's take a look at some of these behaviors. And then teachers, you can either use the chat or you can write these down. I want you to kind of point out some of the behaviors that you would use to identify students are at risk. And a big portion of this is you might notice some of these are positive behaviors and some of these are negative behaviors. So that's one thing I really appreciate about the new look of SAEBRS and how it works with your students. Okay, and I have some people typing some ones in that you'd identify students that are at risk. So yes, we're going to focus on those negative behaviors, and it can be social, academic, or emotional. Ah, yes. And thank you so much, Becky, for this. You're talking about the academic behavior. So lack of engagement. Are they engaged in lessons? Are they producing acceptable work? Excellent there. So thank you so much for your feedback. So just remember, this page is always going to be available for you if you're signed into my Nearpod. If you haven't joined yet, here is that link one more time. And thank you so much for participating with me. Now let's compare and contrast some of the differences between SAEBRS and my SAEBRS. So SAEBRS is that one that you're doing as a teacher. So if you have a class of 20, it should take you about 40 minutes the first time you do this. You can do it for any grade levels K through 12. The My SAEBRS version, so if your students are pretty familiar with the STAR testing format, they'll be very familiar with how the testing works and how they log in. It's also available in Spanish. This one you can administer to the entire group at the same time. So you can do this for tier 1 through 3 along with your STAR testings. So in your beginning, middle, and end of year testings. It takes your students about 5 to 10 minutes. And then again, that time usually changes the more that you do this with your students. So 5 to 10 minutes. Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. And this one, though, only administer this, or it's at least normed referenced for grades 2 through 12. And then along with the being available in English and Spanish, this one can be read aloud to your students. We're not just checking your students' ability to read independently in this one. And then one more consideration, this is just a me thing. You don't have, this is not a guidance from Renaissance. If any of your students need headphones during testing, just have all of your students wear headphones for testing so no student feels singled out because they're not as proficient reader as some other students in their classroom. Okay, so let's talk about the My SAEBRS. There's also one additional question that students are asked, and I usually, if I'm there in person, I give out a piece of candy if somebody can identify the question when they see it later in the different slides and when they're trying it out. But the student side is just like the teacher side. It measures social, academic, and emotional behavior, grades 2 through 12. It's 20 items instead of 19, about 5 to 10 minutes for students. And along with this, you should, and it's recommended, student and teacher, because you can compare and contrast how a teacher feels about a student and how a student feels about themselves and the situation that they're in. Do I have any questions about the SAEBRS or My SAEBRS so far? Yeah, so they're both pretty similar, pretty self-explanatory. I think when you see the step-by-steps, then you'll have some more questions. But before we get to that, let's talk about why it's important that we screen our students. So I'll give you just a second to read what is universal screening. And if you see a word or a couple words that really pop out to you, and they're the same as when I read this, I'll kind of highlight that for you. So what do you notice about what universal screening is? Hmm. And hopefully you notice. Oh yes, man, Becky, you're gonna be awesome to work with today. I can already tell. You hit that right there on the head. Additional support, or which students are gonna need additional support. And then there, Cynthia, you hit my favorite word in this. All students. So you can give this to any student, whether they're tier 1, 2, or 3. You might want to give your tier 2 and 3 additional screenings to see how they feel, but all students, those 3 times a year, you can give this screener to. So excellent job there. Thank you so much, teachers. So why do we screen? Well, you know why we screen. This is your specialty. It's to evaluate the levels of risk. What kind of risk is it? Is it social, emotional, or academic? And then this is another thing too. The only thing I don't like about special education and working in that field is we're only one person and we only have a bucket full of so much water. And if we know which students need more of our effort or more of our water, we can prioritize and specifically help students to the best of our ability. So which students need more help, which students need less help, which students are changing and which ones are improving, which instructional strategies are working with those students, and then we can reevaluate and kind of go from there. So let's talk about the surveys. It's pretty simple on the teacher side. It's just never, sometimes, often, and always. And then the student side is the same. Never, sometimes, often, and always. But I really like this, especially for our students, our younger students. It gives a nice visual representation of what never, sometimes, often, and always looks like. And then here's your English, here's your Spanish version of that. So it does have that in there as well. And now I want you to be able to try this out along with me. So I have, let's see, 19 people here. And depending on your grade level, you're going to pick a student to log in and try out the assessment. Or you can watch me try out the assessment too. So if you've logged into your Renaissance website before, right-click where it says Renaissance Demo Website. Use an incognito window to log in there. And then once it loads, you're going to click I'm a student. And then you're going to have to enter my Renaissance ID number. So that's this number up here at the very top. Otherwise, if you try to log into the website and use your website, it's going to give you this is an error message or student cannot log in. So then usernames, depending on your grade level. Now, you shouldn't be using this with first grade, but I also have my first grade in here. We're going to use Mantalk, and then you're going to use a number after it. So I'm going to be Mantalk 1. And for example, let's see, Becky, you're at the very top there. You're the first person with the camera on. Becky, you could be Mantalk number 2. And then Lauren, number 3, so on and so forth. So any number from 2 to 30 you can choose for your username. And then you're going to put in ABC123 for your password. And if you wanted to, you could split your screen just like I am right now, so you can see that login information and put that directly in there. But I'm going to go back to my previous view. So just to review the step-by-steps to try this out as a student and then to follow up as a teacher, you're going to click where it says Renaissance Demo Website. I did a right-click incognito window so it doesn't save any cookies or login information. I'm going to put Mantalk with a number. I'm going to be Mantalk number 1. That means you can be Mantalk 2, 3, 4, 15, 20, 25, 29. Any number there. We all have the same password. It's ABC123. And then you can try out the assessment. So I'm going to click Login. And here is my home page for my student. Now, I only have Star and my SAEBRS to do my SAEBRS. And then just a quick question. I don't want to leave anybody behind. Were you able to log in, or are you just going to follow me in seeing what the student side looks like? Okay. So then I just click, and this is exactly the step-by-steps your students will do. They just click on My SAEBRS. It's going to log them into the software. And then right away, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. English, Espanol. If you need audio, it can be played for you.
Choose the option that best represents the answer you want. Be sure to choose the best answer carefully. Click on the button below to begin the activity.
And then you click Start, and you can have the questions read to you if you need.
I argue with others. I get along with my peers. I lose my temper. I disrupt class. I am respectful.
So notice that some of these are positive behaviors and some of these are negative behaviors.
Other people like me. I have trouble waiting my turn.
And you can do this as a student that you have in mind, so you could see roughly what their score would be.
I like school. I am ready for class. I get good grades. I have trouble working alone. It's hard to pay attention in class. I participate in class. I feel sad. I feel nervous. I like to try new things. I am happy. I am worried. When something bad happens, it takes me a while to feel better. I like being alone.
Okay, did anybody notice the question that students would be asked that teachers wouldn't be asked? You might have seen one that seemed like a student-led question, but when we hop into the teacher side in just a second, you'll be able to identify it pretty easy. So I'm going to click finish, and then when I'm done, just like for STAR testing, best practices, have a student read a book or work on homework after they're done because it may take their classmates more or less time than them to finish the assessment. So that is the student side. And now the reason I'm having you do the student side is I'm going to click I'm a teacher slash administrator. I'm going to log in as Mantalk. I'm just going to get rid of the numbers after that. And then I can log in as the teacher of that classroom, that fake classroom. And I can go to SAEBRS to see my results. Before I do that, though, did anybody have any questions about the student side? Were you able to log in? Okay, perfect. So when you're doing that practice on your own independently, if you weren't able to do that here today, think about these key items and questions as you're doing that. And then I'm going to go in as a teacher now. And here's my teacher homepage. It might look slightly different than yours. You might have the newer look, but SAEBRS and my SAEBRS will be on the left-hand side over here where we've made those shortcuts. But otherwise, if you have this view, then you just click on SAEBRS. So I'll give you just a minute to do that, and then I will be right back. So I want everybody to be able to log in and try out and see the results of that with the students there. So just give me 1 second. Okay, and we are back. Now, we didn't have a ton of students that did it here with me live today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into my other profile with a little bit more data. So let me do that here, just so we can see the teacher side a little bit more clearly with student data. So again, I'm going to go to, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to SAEBRS here, and this should load in just a second. But here we are. And another thing to kind of highlight and point out for you, as you are administering this to, and just to point out, Cynthia, all students, you'll have your screening windows listed here. So I have your fall, winter, and spring, or beginning, middle, and end. And you can add additional SAEBRS marking periods in there if you'd like to. And I think this is especially important when we're looking at the results from this page, because you can compare current versus previous results. And as a teacher, to do your part in this, and I'll use Pam here for my example, all you have to do is click on those 3 dots and click Start Assessment. And so it's not questions like students are being asked. It's just being asked generally about the same kind of things. So arguing, often, cooperation with peers, temper, outbursts, disruptive behavior, polite, impulsiveness, academic, sometimes, often, sometimes distracted, academic engagement, emotional, and then I'm also going to show you here the neat part about the teacher side is as you're doing this, the scores are adding up at the very bottom. So as you do these, you're able to see the score changing on the very bottom. And so teachers, a big portion of this is your opinion about a student, and you're going to see the total score. And if the student is really on the borderline, but you know that they are going to be a student that you think are at risk, you might want to go back and look at some of your answers and just see, well, is that actually true, or pretty much are they disruptive always? So notice how that changed my score right here. So then when I'm done, don't hit submit yet. This is really key too. You may want to add, here are some sample notes. But you could actually do some real ones. You could say something like, Tam struggles in large groups and is better served by having one-on-one instruction. Oops, sorry. Or you can put whatever you'd like in here. And the nice part is whether you're the classroom teacher, you're the instructional specialist working with the student, you're the principal, anybody. The more notes and more items you put in here, the better that you'll be able to discover, okay, this is why this teacher thinks that Pam is performing this way. So you can see notes, like here's a note for Quinn in the past. So bright student that doesn't seem to care for the social and academic opportunities, interactions at school. He's going through a very emotional time right now. We're looking on putting some supports in place for him and his family. So those are the kind of notes that could be really critical, especially when we've identified which students are at risk and which ones are not. So that is the teacher side. So it's as simple as going from your home page, clicking on SAEBRS, and then clicking on and making sure that you're working in whatever screening window you're working in, and just clicking those three dots and doing those assessments with your students. So the screening windows are listed up here. So if you want to compare previous ones, once the screening window is over, you cannot put new scores in there. But if the screening window is open or active, you can always delete it and go back in there and modify or change your responses for the student. Now, before we get into the reports, I want to break down some of those questions and how they work with your students. So, one second here. I just got to reload my Nearpod page. Okay, so checking for understanding. So we can kind of skip past this portion. I think we've explained it pretty well. Let's go into the actual scores and data. And you can use the chat if you had additional questions or wonders. So how did we identify which students are at risk and which students aren't? Well, we did a norming study with all the students that we gathered this data for and found that students at low risk are at or above the 16th percentile rank for national. Some students at risk or some risk are third to the 16th percentile ranks, and then students and high risk are in the bottom 3% of students nationwide based on that score. And then how did we determine those different categories? So remember when I was in the teacher side of the software and I was adding up all those different scores based on my responses here. So I'll just do 3 here. So if you are thinking your students at some risk, but they're at a 37 right now, is there one testing category that you might have put sometimes or often, where you should have put never or always? So here's the cut scores for each of those categories. And this is on the SABRS side based off 19 questions for the teacher. And then here are the cut scores for the student side of the software. So they're asked one additional question. So you might notice that the scores are slightly different with that one additional question. And then now we're going to be running the different reports. So the reports are right on the same page where you administer SAEBRS or My SAEBRS. So if you want to see more student data in that website, use, um, Montauk 4 or 5 or 6 and add some more information in there. But how do I view the reports? Well, here I have the raw cut score number. But right here at the very top, I can do, and I'm going to suggest doing the group screening report first. So when you're in the SAEBRS, click View SAEBRS Reports, go to the group screening report first, and then in here, and I'm going to go back to my fall window because I have a little bit more data there. I have every one of the student responses and every one of the teacher responses. And a nice thing about this is I can arrange any of these columns. They're all sortable. And as a teacher, I've identified Trinity, Quinn, Zena, and Pam as students at risk. But let's see overall which other students I might not have been aware of. So I wasn't aware that Zoe is having such an emotional behavior, a difference in how I perceive that student versus how that student perceives herself. So all of these columns are sortable. Compare and contrast your results with how the students feel about them. And let's investigate. Here's an example. I've identified Quinn as a student that needs more investigation or a student that's at risk, but Quinn doesn't think he is in any of the areas. So now we're going to go back and we're going to get Trinity, Quinn, Zena, and Pam, and we're going to investigate them a little bit further. Now you can run this individual skills report for all students, or you can go here and you can do Pam, Quinn, Trinity, and I forgot Zena. There we go. So then you're just seeing the information for those students. And then I'm going to run an individual skills report. But again, remember, you can run this for your entire class if you'd like to. And here is the big payoff for this. I can print or save this or download this data. And then here's Pam. Here's my teacher overall score. Here's Pam's student score overall. And we both identify her as some risk. But let's break down each of those areas a little bit further. And then you might notice the question that students are asked that teachers are not asked about the students, and that is, am I liked by others? Or do my peers like me? So teacher responses will be in dark blue. Student responses, I think this is like a light purple with stripes through it, but you can easily see the difference between the two. Teacher response, student response. And then positive behaviors, higher score is better. So when you get to where there's no red, that means low risk. And negative behaviors, the higher the score gets you into the red or identifies characteristics of risk. And definitely looks like we both agree on Pam here. There are some very high risk behaviors in the academic domain. So we're pretty much on par with each other for the positive behaviors, but we've identified that she definitely does not like working alone. Same thing for our emotional behaviors. So this is one I was not aware about this student. So Pam, I thought, well, most of the time, Pam, or sometimes, Pam can be withdrawn, when in fact, Pam has indicated that almost always she feels withdrawn at school. So, I mean, what kind of valuable insight am I getting from this? I just think it's so neat that I'm able to compare teacher and student responses. Now, again, K through 2, you'll just see your responses and your opinions on the students. But after you get past that grade level, this is where I think the biggest comes into, because you can compare your responses, student responses. These are all printable as well. So if you want to bring information like this to an IEP meeting or to a parent-teacher conference or other items like that, you can print this report by going up to the very top there, click the print or save, and then it's going to put a nice page break in between each student's results. So all student results fit on one page when you're sharing this with families. And then with this too, you can also download the data to have a discussion about it. Okay. Now, I haven't gotten too many questions from you so far, but I've shown you pretty much all the basics of SAEBRS and my SAEBRS. What questions do you have so far about this? And if you want, you can absolutely feel free to unmute and just ask your questions too. Okay, I am waiting for one response in the chat here. Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, that makes me feel great. So now I think it's pretty straightforward, just like some of you have responded to me in the chat. But if you do have questions or you do have concerns, this is where I want all of us to feel comfortable. So everybody in the Nearpod, if you could go to slide 33, well, it automatically is on slide 33, but please click on the resources and support. That opens up a PDF document. You can download or save this, or if you're in Chrome, you can favorite this page. And I definitely want everybody here to do that because this is our 1-800 number. You get a real live person when you call this number Monday through Friday, and your time would be 7:30 a.m. until 8 o'clock p.m. Also, if you're in the software and you're exploring the data and you can't remember exactly, like, oh, I can't remember what Sam said about those windows. How do I make sure I can select the newest window that I'm in? Click the question mark button and use chat with support. That's also a real live person. And if you click the help button on any page, it's actually page specific. So literally, it will take you step by step with screenshots. How do I get to this page? How do I run this for different students? How do I view the data? And what does that data mean? So it literally has every single step by step with these wonderful screenshots if you click the question mark button in there. I also want to let you know there are pre-recorded versions of what we're doing today, but you'll receive a recorded version of what we're doing. There's also our Smart Start. And in our very next page, specific resources just for SAEBRS. So here's the help page for SAEBRS. And it has everything from how do students take this to the record book, the different reports, the administrator version of the reports, how the norms and benchmarks were created. I also have right in there too our product page. So this is an open page that you don't need to be logged into anything to do. So if you have families or if you have like the board is, what is SAEBRS and my SAEBRS? It literally will tell you more about it. So this is a really great website that shows you here's what the reports look like. How does it look? What's the difference between SAEBRS and my SAEBRS? What are the different measures used in those? And this is a website that has, again, commonly asked questions that families might ask. Oh, and if you don't see SAEBRS and thank you for speaking up there. If you don't see SAEBRS on your dashboard, there's one additional thing I'd like you to do now. Reach out to your administration team and they have to assign that product to you. Because by default, SAEBRS and my SAEBRS, because it deals with social and emotional awareness, that's not something that's automatically engaged. And actually, I'm really glad that you asked me that question too, because there is one additional step, teachers, that you have to do so students are able to see the my SAEBRS assessment. And that should be done by your administration team, but if it's not, you can go to your preferences by clicking on your initials. And at the very, very bottom of those preferences, under individual student preferences, here's the option to enable it so students are able to click on the My SAEBRS assessment, and you just literally select students in your class. And if students opt out of doing this, you can just disable that for them so they can't even log in and do that. Since you asked a really great question here, I'm going to give you a direct shortcut to the more information about how you enable or disable that with the step-by-steps in there. Okay. Well, teachers, we are done pretty early here. So we got about, I'd say 14 or 15 minutes here. What other questions do you have for me today? What areas do you want to explore in the software? Otherwise, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time with me. And if you have just a couple of minutes, there's a quick survey that you can complete built right into the Nearpod. And I'll stop our recording here.